Welcome back, everyone. We're talking about bullying and mental health, and the focus is on depression and anxiety. Just before the break, Dr. Clark, we were looking at how difficult it is for people to recognize and understand when they're depressed and anxious, and where that probably came from. And obviously, bullying is not the only cause of depression. There are a variety of reasons, but for the purpose of this show, we're talking about bullying. And we've looked at how people can be traumatized and how it can lead to this kind of mental health concern. So I wonder if we could, for the purpose to help the audience understand, how does that look? How does it manifest itself, depression, anxiety, in a young child as compared to a teenager, as compared to an adult? What is
in a younger person, depression, you'd probably start to see, again, a lack of interest in normal activities, a change in school grades, usually a dropping in school grades, a dropping in social activities. Do you want to go and play with your friends? No, I don't want to go out. I don't want to play with my friends. Well, what would you like to do today? I don't want to do anything. Sometimes sleeping for long periods of time, or again, changes in sleep pattern, not sleeping at all, changes in eating patterns, often, suddenly stop, most common, stop eating. So any changes that you say, you go, this is not my, you have to go with your instincts a little bit as parents and go, this is not normal for my child, then often we're looking at some kind of depression. Again, who knows why it's caused? Because could be, but if you don't know, it could be something that's going on in the home, and often is, or it could be something that's going on at school. But whenever you see any change over a relatively short period of time that just doesn't seem like your child and they're just not interested, that is often, and again, it can be difficult because children don't have the vocabulary to say, what are you feeling? Well, I'm feeling depressed. They might say, so again, as specifically as possible to go, what kind of feeling? Is it closest to mad? Is it closest to sad? Is it, right? And get sort of a, well, yeah, it's kind of a sad feeling. It's kind of a, that's what you should hear, I think.
I find for kids, that's often difficult because it's easy, and even for adults, it's easy for us to recognize when we're angry, or we're mad, when we're upset with someone or frustrated, but to recognize when we're feeling sad or when we're feeling hurt or when we're feeling disappointed, we tend to all describe those as being angry.
Yeah, and sometimes, again, some depression, again, may exhibit in the form of angry outbursts, which as parents we just go, well,
very important, and I'm glad you identified that. This is just a behavior problem.
This is just, you just mind your manners, young man. But
because lots of parents and even therapists don't recognize that often kids who, unless there's some biological, neurological problem that the child may have, that would account for the being often when kids are acting out, when they're becoming violent, aggressive or whatever, their behavior is changed so much from what they may normally do. A lot of the time it is because they are feeling depressed and
suddenly,
anxious.
That's another change. You could see suddenly getting in fights at school, right? Or even things like stealing things at school. Suddenly getting into problems. Suddenly the report card says, he's bothering the other children, and you go, this is not normal for my child. So you really do have to have your radar on, because and don't normally in children it may not be clear. It may not be so anything, but definitely the default emotion in children for any kind of frustration, or a lot of it may also be the inability to tell you what's wrong.
Exactly.
What's wrong with you? I don't know. That it comes out in the form of anger, and so suddenly, again, throwing things in the house or slamming doors, or these could all be symptoms of depression. So, yeah, and on some level, so you have to, and so how is that different than, you know, if my child already throws things, are they depressed? Maybe, but again, not all anger. It can
Exactly.
be related to
Exactly.
depression, but usually something's going on.
And
Right?
even if it's not, at least that behavior is telling you something. It's telling you, particularly if it's a significant change, a departure from how that particular child usually behaves. It's an indication that something is not right with this person. Something needs to be looked at. And for parents out there, the important thing that we'd like to impart is the importance of really speaking to your child and being patient and giving them the time and the permission to express themselves how they need to. Because we have to remember, kids don't express themselves the way we do. And sometimes they may be afraid to say, you know, what exactly is going on, particularly if it's something that may be happening in the home that the parents may not know, or at school that they're afraid for their parents to find out. So they're not going to be that forthcoming. So we have to be patient. We have to help them and give them the latitude to express themselves and to be able to feel comfortable to say whatever they need to say, so we can get an understanding in order to help them.
Right.
So important. So important. We're talking about kids. How does that look in terms of how behaviors, are there similar differences in a teen versus a younger child in how we would see? I know there are lots of similarities because you also see the eating and the sleeping and, you know, weight gain, weight loss.
You know, truthfully, I think because teenagers are going through such unusual phases, you know, hormonal changes, they're experimenting often with drugs or alcohol. And so if they're sleeping, you know, in my experience, if you see parents interested in elementary school children, they pay much more close attention. As they get into high school, it's like, well, so it's not so, we're not so quick to be able to, or we're not so sure what's causing that. And so parents leap to all kinds of different, equally possible things. That there might be some drugs involved, that there might be some, but in most cases, those issues would be concurrent with some kind of emotional issue going on. Like the reason children experiment with drugs, the reason they get into those other things is because they're not feeling good.
Exactly.
And so either they are somewhat depressed or somewhat anxious. We didn't really talk about anxiety and how, I don't know if you want to.
Well, we can, but I want to get back to what you just said because, again, another key point that parents really need to hear and understand, that in terms of depression or anxiety, what have you, drug and alcohol use and abuse, that usually is behind, I would probably say in virtually every case, that is behind it.
So it's amazing how nobody makes that connection. That you know, we go, oh, drugs, alcohol, well, we've got to deal with that, and we've got to talk about addiction, and boom, the attention goes immediately towards the drug use, and we don't allow that in our house, and let's get right on top of that without any sort of why did they feel the need to go to drugs and alcohol. And fundamentally, normally, you know, why, I mean, there is a little bit, there's experimentation in high school, but the people who get into some kind of trouble at some point are using those things because they don't feel good. And I want to feel better. It's a self-medication. And so don't leap too quickly towards the drugs without looking at the whole life and the whole picture.
Self-medication, self-protection sometimes, because particularly in situations where they're being bullied, regardless of where. And if they're feeling totally hopeless, useless, you know, their self-image is completely shattered, in a way, you know, drinking or taking drugs just blocks that all out. I don't have to hear it. I don't have to deal with it.
Exactly.
You know, it's a way of running
I want it to go away. I want it to go, because I've tried dealing with it, or in my limited, I can't do that. And so what do I need? I need a break. I need to get away from this. And so the only way that I can be happy, the only way that I can get by in this current situation is to turn to drugs and alcohol to get by. And yes, then we have a set of other problems.
Exactly.
But drugs and alcohol do not spring,
No,
you know.
it doesn't come from nowhere. There is something else going on. And I'm so glad that you identify that, because often that is exactly how we intervene. You know, and yes, you must do something about the drugs. There's no, but you also have to get at the heart, because that's a symptom of really what's going on, what's the underlying issue there in terms of them being depressed, anxious, and what's leading to that depression, what's leading to that anxiety. Very useful information. In terms of adults, are there any significant differences in terms of what it looks like, depression and anxiety, in an adult versus a younger person?
Yeah, I would say yes and no. I mean, there's that same loss of interest, anxiety. Usually, actually, or it's more common for some of these things to actually develop into adulthood. You know, you may get by in your high school or wherever without it becoming acute, and it's not until later that people start to develop the symptoms of anxiety and depression, and then they're shocked because they don't immediately associate, you know, what might have happened in my past with what I'm experiencing now. But we develop those habits of repressing, internalizing those emotions.
So for adults, it's more repressed feelings that they are now coming out and that they're dealing with often.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, and in dealing with some of these things, again, there's some soul searching. It requires a certain maturity of adults, that if it looks like my child is depressed or anxious, that I am able to comfortably talk about emotions, my own emotions, such that we can now open up this topic to, you may be unhappy. That is an area. If you are not comfortable with talking about your own emotions as an adult, this is not something you're necessarily going to be comfortable talking with your teenager about.
Note, we are going to be looking at the end of the program. Thank you. Good night.